So here we are with Eric Asare in a blueberry field right next to honeybee hives. And Eric is one of the 6 graduate students that we have working on this blueberry pollination project.
I'm from Ghana, and before I came here, I had my master's degree already, and I worked with cocoa farmers, trying to understand their adoption behavior of farming practices.
Tell us just a little bit about what is the main question you're trying to answer in your economic analysis.
The main question is trying to investigate the randomness in bee numbers, bees in terms of the native bees and honeybees, and how such randomness, such variation will impact on the profitability of a blueberry farm.
Let me just ask you 2 things, maybe to clarify a little bit of that for our viewing audience. And number 1, so when you're talking about the randomness, you're referring to things such as maybe the fluctuation in bee numbers from year to year that a grower might experience.
Yes.
And the next thing you brought out is when you said you're trying to quantify and estimate a fruit set productivity function. So really, you're trying to quantify the factors that affect fruit set.
Fruit set, yes.
And so, from what you have told me, factors such as the numbers of bees in the field are important, but what maybe are a couple of other factors that affect fruit set that you've been trying to build into your predictive models?
Okay, for fruit set, the key variables are the numbers of honeybees, the number of native bees, and the number of pollination days. And the pollination days, the number of pollination days will give you the pollination window.
You've developed these models, and do you expect that growers might be able to use these models to make better decisions on whether they should bring in more honeybees or whether they can rely on more on native bees? Is that sort of the ultimate goal for these models?
Yes, that is the ultimate goal of this model.
Well, thank you very much, Eric, for sharing that with us, and we've enjoyed having you on this project.
Thank you so much, and I'm happy to be in a very wonderful team, a team that we have 9 professors, very open, very accessible, and I'm very lucky and happy to have acquired to be in such a wonderful team.
Well, thanks.
We're Clary Hill, and according to what producers say in this area, and from what Frank has said, is this is probably one of the largest contiguous blueberry growing areas in the mid-coast of Maine. In this area and in general, we're looking at the economics of these alternatives to renting bees. It's involved pretty detailed interviews with cooperating producers. The thing that really impressed me about Paul, after interviewing lots of growers, is you're one of the few growers that you would encounter both at a traditional growers meeting as well as the organic growers meetings.
Through work that Frank Drummond did and Connie Stubbs, we became more aware of other things such as the leafcutter bee. Quite a bit of work's been done with that. Mm-hmm. Bumblebees becoming available as a commercial option is a fairly new industry, and over the last 20-30 years they've made great improvements in the box they have and in having a consistent quality when you purchase them. And then again, through our blueberry meetings, everyone is much more aware of our native pollinators that we have in our fields. Now that we have herbicides, our fields are much cleaner, so we don't have much of a food supply for natural pollinators like we used to have. So it becomes more important having spots like the one over there that can house some of our natural pollinators to help us. And then last year at the meetings there was the discussion bringing up that maybe we should look into possibly planting some areas where that the blueberries aren't growing in, be it the natural border or at least taking care of it to encourage a food supply. But when it comes to planting for the native pollinators, we also do not want to be planting something that's going to seed as a weed into our cropland. So a lot of thought needs to be given to what might possibly be planted.
Right. Right. Because there's a lot of management that goes in keeping this so that there's no, weed problems.
That's right. and weeds really decrease our yield, so we need to keep the weeds out. Right. But on the other hand, we need spots where we can grow non-invasive plants for the native pollinators. In our state, we have a very active backyard beekeepers, hobbyists, and there's a lot of support. We have a lot of good resources for those people, but for people like myself, I don't have the time to be doing my own bees. The environment in Maine where you're going to keep the bees here year-round is very challenging, even for the hobbyists, and they usually have a very high fatality rate each year. So for most people like me, it's probably not feasible to get into doing bees, especially when we can rent them. So a hive that comes to us from Florida, they've already built up the strength of the hive. So when they arrive here, they're ready to work. There's a full workforce. Whereas the hobbyist hive, when we go into blueberry blossom, they're just starting to build up the hive. So there's not very many workers available in the beginning. By the time the local hive builds up the strength of bees within it, our blueberry blossom is over with.
Right. Next thing you had talked about was rented bumblebees in quads.
Yes.
All right.
And so again, Frank Drummond and Connie Stubbs both did a lot of preliminary work, and different ones of us have tried them. And even the bumblebee company will say that their product is not to replace honeybees, but to supplement the honeybees. So most of us that have used bumblebees we don't decrease the amount of honeybees we're using. We will just add some bumblebees. There's different foraging habits between the bumblebee and the honeybee. So sometimes when it's in the 50s, which it quite often is here, the bumblebees will be more active than the honeybees. The bumblebee quad has 4 sections in it, and they say there's like 150 workers in each section. So that would be 600 workers in a quad, and but with a good active honeybee hive, you're going to have 20 to 40,000 workers out in the field. So the numbers just don't match up.
Right.
Sometimes we run into other problems, such as maybe the bees aren't going to be available to be rented right when we want them. And so if we got native pollinators in the field, they may do the early pollination if the honeybees are 3 or 4 days later than we want them here.
A lot of these alternatives, it's a way to kind of buffer that risk.
That's correct. On the grower side, we really depend on the extension to really to do the research and then to come back and show us the results. Many people are very interested, but they need more information so they can make their own decisions as to if it's a feasible thing for them to do.
So we're doing a pretty in-depth analysis of evaluating these budgets for these alternatives. And we're also surveying growers to develop pretty detailed budgets on blueberries themselves. So organic blueberries, and then for traditional blueberries, low input, medium input, and high input growers. And once we've evaluated the economics of the blueberry budgets, we'll be integrating them with taking on these various alternatives, such as creating more pasture strips. So we can evaluate the whole farm economics of growing blueberries in concert with utilizing these various alternatives, such as pasture strips for native bees. I think probably in the case of blueberries, the question would be how can growers make long-term strategic investments in diversifying their pollinator sources? So, enhancing their native bee population to greater knowledge of what's out there and how they could, best do that for their situation. As well as potentially exploring alternatives such as renting bumblebee quads, as well as perhaps keeping their own bees. So I think it's probably not a one-size-fits all, but it's wise for growers to explore alternatives, because if hive prices double or triple, you want to be ready and have at least explored those alternatives.